Hi. I was checking out YouTube this morning and I noticed that the Law and Crime Network's YouTube channel had recently uploaded its documentary, Fake Messiah Exposed for Doing Naked Rituals with Kids. And if you've watched that documentary, you might have noticed that I appear in a couple places near the beginning, interviewed as a journalist who covered the story. What almost no one ever covers, however, when talking about the Wayne Bent case, is the time that Bent and his Lord Our Righteousness Church spent in Arizona. There's always mention of the origins in Idaho and the move to New Mexico, but rarely ever mention of the time in a remote area of Arizona. So in July of 2008, I dug into that and I traveled to an area about an hour's drive outside of Yuma, Arizona, an area called Castle Dome, and it did seem like the end of the earth. It was very remote, and what a landscape. But that is where, armed with a old Panasonic home camcorder and a rinky-dink microphone, I was able to interview and document interviews with Johnny Miller and Alan Armstrong, both former members of the LOR. And Mr. Armstrong in particular had some very strong words aimed at Wayne Bent, and I gave Mr. Bent the opportunity to respond, and he did so via email, and all of that's part of this two-part series that back in 2008 I published on my blog. Well, here I've taken those two parts and combined them to make a single video and now bring it to YouTube because this often goes unnoticed, this time in Castle Dome. It's important, and I think helps provide a thorough understanding, a more complete understanding of Wayne Bent and the people's lives that he definitely impacted. So I hope you enjoy the video.
I come out here and I do remember everything. All along through the years, people have feared that Strong City, Lord of Righteous, was a suicide cult.
15 years have passed now since members of the Lord Our Righteousness Church came from Sandpoint, Idaho, to spend the winter here in this remote area, more than an hour's drive north of Yuma, Arizona.
And you come out here and it's like a different reality.
They lived out of their RVs on 26 acres of private land near the base of Castle Dome Mountain. 3 ministers within the church each owned a third of the land, located on a mining claim within the Kofa National Wildlife Refuge.
I left on my own accord because I felt that I was being thrust out by God.
Johnny Miller was among them.
I miss the fellowship. You spend 20 years with a group and you live with them, and that's the only society that you know. You grow up with them, you work with them, eat with them, worship with them, and they're your only family.
In time, church members would trumpet the virtues of that society to the world. The emergence of the internet provided just the platform to do so. LOR member Shakaniah Trevesser wrote about the church's time at Castle Dome. We were truly in school there, being taught by God Himself in preparation for the light that was to come, she begins. Then writes, for me personally, it was also a time of deprogramming of all the religious thoughts and ideas and pictures I had gathered over the years. This had to happen in order to be able to see and recognize the second coming of Christ when He would return to this earth in the fullness of time. It was there at Castle Dome that we caught the first rays of the light of His appearing. Father said to me, "Today is the day, and now is the hour of the second coming of Christ to this world."
Throughout all my life, I've never really had a father figure in my life, and not that I'm saying
Johnny Miller says he cared deeply for the man who emerged to become the church's lone leader, Wayne Bent.
Like, he got honest with me. If he saw things in my character that needed to be worked on, or things that I was sort of swaying off to one side, and I would come to him about it, or he would call me in, he would not beat around the bush. He would tell me exactly what I needed to know, what I needed to hear, with suggestions.
But Miller says that as the years rolled by, things, well, they got strange.
Well, at the time of the consummation, I had questions about the things that were being done with the two witnesses, and we all had these questions, but it happened so slowly with us. It just looked like it took, he built up to this for years. And the experience of that began here at Castle Dome when we really saw the light in the sanctuary, which was the light of the dawning of Michael coming to live in man. And we had no concept of what that meant back then. But I believe Wayne or Michael did understand back then, and it was just part of the process of bringing us as a group into it, slowly but surely. And it happened so slowly, like the frog sitting in the pot of water, just being boiled slowly and just not hopping out. We didn't know what was coming.
Thank you, Michael, for all that you've done for me.
But at the end there, especially with the thing with this, the time he was with the seven virgins, I just didn't have an understanding of what was going on. I just couldn't understand why God in heaven would require these intimate type of things with these people.
And 7 years after the church moved to New Mexico, it all made for a compelling 2007 British documentary called The End of the World Cult.
Oh, my daddy, I need you. Come and help me. I need a deeper experience with you than I have ever had before. Come down upon me and fill me with yourself.
Now that we're at this time where the world really is at an end, I'm very, very grateful.
This isolated dirt road leads to a group of people who are waiting for the world to end.
The state entered the compound after hearing about Bent lying naked with adult and underage members of his
In May 2008, a New Mexico grand jury indicted Wayne Bent for allegedly having sexual contact with two underage girls and for contributing to the delinquency of minors. The case is scheduled to go to trial in October.
Do you think he's had sexual contact with minors?
No, I don't think he's had sexual contact. I believe in the healing, he's put his hand on my chest, and I've seen him put his hand on my wife's chest and other things, and I didn't feel like it was anything like that. It was just like when Jesus used to touch people, and we actually considered that that's what he was doing. He was blessing us. Now, I don't understand why they had to get nude. I don't understand that. I mean, Jesus, you don't see him touching nude people. I mean, they had their clothes on when he blessed them and healed them. This I don't understand, and this is part of the reason why I had to go and be alone and reason these things out.
That ultimately meant moving to Yuma and a return visit to Castle Dome.
Where we had our meetings. We sat here, lawn chairs, and everybody sat, and Wayne and the elders was over here, and he spoke from over here.
It's been 15 years now since Wayne Bent and his flock were last here at Castle Dome, and you can still make out the trail here that went down this hill and led the flock down to the sanctuary just below.
Only believe whatever I say. Only believe.
Can you still hear the songs?
Not here anymore. This, like the presence has left this place, if you know what I mean.
Fellowship within the LOR is not all that Miller's left behind.
You left behind a wife.
Yes.
How hard was that?
Well, this past July 6th was our 17th wedding anniversary. I met Lillian in the church.
To fully consider how a man could leave the wife he loves behind in the LOR, Miller says it's important to understand an accelerating chain of events. Take that day in 2001, he says, when Wayne Bent called a meeting in the New Mexico woods, then simply walked off into the wilderness, alone.
He just got up and left and walked away, and we didn't know where he went or why he left us. And that was like when he started having that drawing, that when God came into him, and he knew it, and he just knew that things weren't going to be the same anymore.
Miller says that after several days, Bent returned from his time in the woods, where God, Bent said, had entered him.
And Wayne asked each of us individually in the group meeting, "Would you marry me?" And everybody said yes, and one gentleman said, darn tootin' I would. I mean, it was just like we didn't really know what we were doing, but yet we all said yes, because we knew something was coming.
Soon, couples were terminating their earthly marriages.
Some folks have been married for 30, 40 years, and they were separating, and so we can have this closer union with God. A lot of the men in the church had a difficulty with that because they were really used to being with their spouse, and I had an issue with that too, but yet, is this God's will? Everyone seems to be doing it.
You keep a picture of your wife.
Yeah, I do, and I've got it here in my wallet. Can you get that?
Sure.
This was taken shortly around the time we got married. I look like a sort of a caveman there, but that's just how it was back then. But you can tell I was a pretty happy guy.
He wasn't happy a few months ago, back when Bent and his followers were still communicating with the outside world.
It startled me.
When Miller says he received this email from his wife.
I was greatly concerned about what she said in it. She implied that, talking about our earthly marriage, that she would never ever go back to that. And she talked about, how she's married to Michael now, as we all were supposedly married to Michael. And that for her to go back to her old ways of how things used to be, married life, that she would, actual literal quote, she would commit suicide big time. I'm not there to help her, and I don't feel like I would be really welcome to go back there to talk to her, to try to talk her out of it or reason with her. The phone, as far as I know, the phone's not connected in the house now where she's staying, and she's not talked to me via email because they're on their word fast now. And like I'm cut off, and I can't share these things with her to find out what she really meant by those words. And but I know she knows what she meant, and that concerns me greatly.
Just after I turned off the camera, the cheerful disposition I'd seen from Miller to this point gave way to raw emotion.
Sorry.
It's okay. Well, that's real. You can only do so much covering up, can't you?
I just love my wife.
I asked Miller if he'd been masking his pain.
Is that too strong?
We've all become good at masking. They're in the Lord our righteousness, I think. I think a lot of people are just pinning so much inside of them that if they had an opportunity to let it out, it would just be like a nuclear explosion in a way. I've had to go through some very hard times this past year and 3/4, and where I've had to get down and really deal with some issues. I even had thoughts that I didn't consider that I had to deal with, and I just sort of white-knuckled through it, if that's the right expression. And then it was God, and he was there, and he didn't fail being my friend, and he continued speaking to me, but there was lots of times where there was like a drought, when I didn't get anything from him, and that was like part of the plan.
And while concerned for his wife's well-being, Miller does not believe the LOR will commit mass suicide, as suggested by the British documentary.
For almost 20 years, he's prepared his followers for the end of the world, and says that time has now come.
We have always loudly said, no, this is not what we're about, because that is the coward's way out. Wayne had always said, I want to be there and look them in the eye when all of this is over. And he says a dead person can't do that.
Strong City has been characterized by the media as a suicide cult.
Members of the LOR even posted a video on the internet refuting any notion that they plan to kill themselves off.
They will ride this out to the end, regardless of what this end will look like, but it's not going to end as mass suicide.
Still, Miller struggles to understand how Wayne Bent and the Lord Our Righteousness Church ended up where it is today.
How things are looking now, it just wasn't what we envisioned, how it would end, and we never thought that there would be court trials and Wayne being accused of these inappropriate dealings with the young ladies. And if we'd known years ago that it would be like this, I don't think the church would have allowed it to happen. I even think that even Wayne, if Wayne really knew, that he wouldn't have allowed it to happen.
Not everyone's convinced that mass suicide among the LOR is out of the question.
Everything that God is, Wayne is not, and everything that Wayne is, God is not.
He's out of the church now, but this former LOR minister has counseled many who've also decided to leave Bent's group. Alan Armstrong still lives at Castle Dome and doesn't hesitate to speak his mind about Wayne Bent.
When you start listening to demons, you're possessed. The final straw is, will you lay down your life for me?
Hear more from Alan Armstrong in part 2 of this Beyond90seconds.com special report, Return to Castle Dome. Late October 2008, Wayne Bent and members of his Lord Our Righteousness Church are more than 2 weeks into their so-called final fast. A November 17th trial date looms for Bent. The state of New Mexico says he's had sexual contact with 2 underage girls. Bent and his attorney have strongly denied those charges. At this moment, though, it's the final fast that's taking center stage. On the internet, family members make dramatic pleas hoping to end the fast, while some others suspect it's all a publicity stunt. None of it would likely come as a surprise to this man.
The final straw is, will you lay down your life for me? I mean, what else do they have to give him? They've given him everything else but their lives, their physical lives. They've given him their husbands, their wives, their children, his daughters. He's a hard taskmaster.
Alan Armstrong is one of Wayne Bent's harshest critics. But in the early 1990s, the 2 men lived side by side and ministered together beneath a remote Arizona mountain called Castle Dome. There's no denying that Alan Armstrong likes to build things. Over the past 15 years, ever since the LOR Church moved on and he stayed behind, Armstrong's nearly single-handedly built a replica of an Old West town called the Castle Dome Mining Museum. When Beyond90seconds.com visited him in July 2008, Armstrong said he decided to leave the LOR because Wayne Bent had decided to take over.
You'd be a church that everything begins and ends with Wayne. One of the last things I addressed to the church, when it was a church at the time, I told them that there's an alarming rate of sexual sin in the group, and that the only thing I could contribute that to was idolatry.
Wayne Bent strongly denies that story. 18 days into his final fast, in this October 26th email to Beyond90seconds.com, Bent responded to Armstrong's comments. "I cannot say what Armstrong is referring to," Bent wrote. "Sexual sins were not tolerated in our church. This man seems to have sex on his mind all the time." Bent also denied that he ever set out to take over the church, explaining Armstrong's departure this way. "Alan was upset because I asked the church not to tithe anymore, since we ministers would no longer be paid." Back in July, Armstrong said he feared the church's followers would eventually pay Bent the ultimate price.
Well, he's dangerous if you give your individuality over to him. And if you give your life to him, and if you give your possessions to him, the people who have given those things over to him, he buys and sells, he owns them. Their whole focus is on leaving. instead of living. Their whole focus is on getting out of here instead of being content and satisfied with what God has given you for the present. And so their whole religion is revolved around not being here.
And Armstrong believes that Bent has something in common with Warren Jeffs and David Koresh.
Well, I believe it's like those other men. They hear voices, and the voices take them down a more narrow and more defined path of self-destruction. They go down a path where instead of receiving blessings, they deny them as a curse, and they end up naked and destitute and blind and wretched.
Responding to Armstrong's comment about evil voices, Bent wrote to Beyond90seconds.com, "This is a little funny to me. I had to smile when I read it. How am I going to deny listening to evil voices? I would only deny that, but then it is one man's opinion. I feel that I only listen to my father, and he is not evil. But like I say, that is his opinion. No, I have not demanded everyone worship me. I have demanded that they don't. We have church members with family, husbands, and wives. They also have children. I have never asked the church to lay down their lives for me. Never. During this fast, I admonish some to take water because they are getting very low. Changes are coming to the bodies of us all. I have told the church, don't follow me. This is my thing. They insist on following me in my fast. They will not stop it until the state leaves me alone. This is because they love me. Mr. Armstrong would not understand this, so he has to paint some kind of force figure into it." When interviewed 3 months before Bent's final fast, Armstrong also touched on a topic that captured a lot of attention in a British documentary called The End of the World Cult.
People who don't receive me will be lost and destroyed.
That film explained that Bent, who's also known as Michael Trevesser, had an ongoing sexual relationship with a woman named Wendy, who's also known as Christiana. Turns out that Wendy had long been married to Bent's son, Jeff.
God came down on Michael and forced him to consummate with Christiana.
And I started seeing that the consummation with Christiana was imminent, and I was going to be, I was going to have to do that.
I was just laying awake and I was thinking about coming over here. And I said to Father, I said, when I go over there, if Michael invites me in, I will ask for the consummation tonight.
So was it just a single occasion, this literal physical consummation?
No, it wasn't.
It was about 17 years ago. Jeff came over to our trailer and he was quite agitated, and he was agitated about how much time his dad was spending with Wendy, and Jeff was engaged to marry Wendy at this time. And Jeff was especially upset because Wendy had gone into town and they'd spent a lot of time together without Jeff or without anyone else. I told Wayne that it wasn't a good idea for you to be going places with Wendy by yourself, and he agreed, and we talked about how it had the appearance of evil, and Wayne submitted that it did have the appearance of evil and he wouldn't do that. And then at one point I told Wayne that if you keep this up, you'll end up sleeping with Wendy. And then he looked at me and he said, he laughed, and I said, I don't think that's too funny. And he says, well, I can guarantee you one thing, that'll never happen. So he guaranteed me that it wouldn't happen, but 17 years later it did happen. It's just the lust of the flesh. It's not the fruit of any spirit. It's not God told him to do it. God struck him dead, and he couldn't move. Well, we know who that God is. Where he couldn't move and he laid on the floor prostrate. The same God that told him to take over. And we see the fruits of this. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Well, and Jeff says it wasn't adultery, she's divorced. Well, you can wrangle the papers around and you can finagle. From God's point of view, it doesn't cut it.
In his October 26th email to Beyond90seconds.com, Bent wrote, "This is entirely untrue. Armstrong has a very poor memory or a gigantic imagination, but I will try to put the pieces together as best I can. I spent 5 months in Castle Dome. One day I was alone with Wendy for about an hour while I helped her put wallpaper in her trailer. I was never alone with her other than that time, and I had no attraction to Wendy whatever. There was another time when I was helping my son find a motorhome and Wendy was there with us. At one point, Wendy and I were going to go to the store across the street for something, don't know what, so we walked briskly across the street because of oncoming traffic. It was then Alan visited me about Wendy. I believe that this was before Castle Dome. His accusations against me utterly astonished me, and I said, "What? You think going across the street with Wendy is immoral?" I think he was embarrassed and went away sheepishly from my house. I began to think the man was a pervert because of his strange accusations and perceptions.
Everything that God is, Wayne is not, and everything that Wayne is, God is not.
Are their bodies actually supposed to go as we see them with our eyes from earth to the heavenly place?
Well, the translation is that the living are going to leave. And the dead in Christ will rise, and we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together to meet them in the air. That's what their hope is.
Have there been people who were supposed to translate but have actually ended up in the ground?
Well, there's people that have hoped that in that group that have ended up in the ground. It's like an example would be Verna Bernheisel. She said that Wayne says you're healed, and the next day she drops dead. That's the kind of healing he does. It's called death.
Wayne said that she was healed?
Yeah, she was healed, and that she had some tumors that could have been taken care of quite easily. Instead of having them addressed, these small cysts, she ended up having strokes, and she ended up dying. And this was quite a test for Verna, because about 15 years before, Wayne had told her that she had no faith because she went to a doctor.
Ben called this story more nonsense, adding, "Some of our people have been to doctors and I say nothing about it. I remember never coming down on Verna 15 years ago. One of our members was Willow, who had some serious illness as a very young child, and her parents took her to the hospital. I visited Willow there. She was in a crisis of dehydration because of some illness, but I don't remember what just now. One of our members was a registered nurse, another one was a physical therapist. I think it is true that Verna could have been saved by an operation. I agree with that. That is my opinion, but I am not sure of that. I offered to take Verna to the hospital 6 times, but she refused to go. I do not remember anything about telling Verna she was healed. I did not even see her the day before she died. I rarely visited her because I did not want to drain her energies. I told her caretakers that if she wanted to see me, that I would come. I told them that if she asked for me, that I would come and pray for her. She never did. When the ambulance came out to see if they could help her and take her to the hospital, she refused to let them take her. We are not in the force here, so we let it be. We have not seen the Armstrongs in 14 years. How would they know what we are doing, except for rumors?
Well, he's used these people up to where there's what's left for them. I mean, what else can they give them?
Their lives?
Their lives. And maybe someday he'll require that. I mean, a lot of times Wayne will say that, as of late, that he won't do something, but whatever he says he won't do, you can't count on that. He says he will do something, don't count on him doing it. And if he says he's going to go on a hunger strike until the girls are brought back, well, they're not brought back, and he quits his hunger strike. And if he says he'll not do something, don't count on him not doing it. I'm not going to go to court. I'm not going to appear before this judge because God will deliver me. Well, God doesn't deliver him. So what is he going to do? Is he going to just go down and go to jail? And or is he going to, is this voice going to come upon him and say, this is what you need to do now?
When you say voice, you mean a voice from him to members of his flock?
Well, in other words, a voice. He hears a voice. He calls it a voice that tells him to take over. He hears a voice, and the voice can be totally anti from Scripture. The voice can say, well, it's now time to go do this. Now that they're fully controlled. I mean, it takes almost 20 years to get to a point where an individual will lay down his life for another individual. Where you fully control him to that point, where you've taken away his individuality, his life, his name, his possessions. He has nothing left. All he has left is his carcass.
Are you saying it's possible then that if convicted, Wayne Bent, it's not beyond your realm of possibilities that Wayne Bent would tell the church members to kill themselves?
Well, they could, if that voice comes in and says, well, it's time to do something now, he would obey that voice, just like he has obeyed it faithfully up to this point.
You're talking about the voices, if it actually exists. Do you believe there is such a voice?
I believe it's the voices of demons.
Do you think that Wayne Bent is possessed?
Yeah, well, when you start listening to demons, you're possessed.
5 days short of Halloween, 18 days into his final fast, Bent also responded to the following written question from Beyond90seconds.com. It appears you are presently determined to go without food or drink for the remainder of your present human life, and it appears you expect your earthly body, your flesh, to die soon as a direct result of the lack of food and water. Would you say these are accurate statements? Feel free to elaborate. Wayne Bent responded, "We expect deliverance, but yes, without that, we will be no more. We are not planning to die, and we are not committing suicide. We are simply demanding a result. Gandhi had a similar fast. We must have justice, or we will not be here. We expect God to hear us. The state has filed false charges against me for no other reason than to eliminate us. No crime has been committed. We will not participate in this lying wonder. If we cannot live in peace, we will not live. But everything is up to God. We wait upon Him for His help."
If you'd like to read the original stories that I wrote about the Wayne Bent case, they're still on the blog, and they are filled with comments from people who were in the LOR, people related to members of the LOR, and people simply with an interest in the case. It was a very engaging and spirited time for the blog, with a lot of engagement on the Wayne Bent case. But to see those stories, go to beyond90seconds.com/category/Wayne-Bent. There are 23 pages of posts still up there. If you like this type of content, please like and consider subscribing. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.